Hey guys, in today's video I want to talk about the women's semifinal matches at the 2024 French Open. And unfortunately, two of the semifinalists underperformed and two of the semifinalists performed well, and we had two lopsided quick matches. Something that's not fun because we want to see competitive matches. So let me start with Iga against Coco. Iga was doing her thing. She was playing solid. Coco, on the other hand, was littering up the stat sheet with forehand errors. Now, it is no secret that Coco has had her struggles with her forehand. Not so much in the hard court swing prior to the US Open, and at the US Open, that's where the forehand was working well. But it is often the case that when Coco doesn't play well, it's the forehand that's the weak spot in her game. Also, the second serve can at times be a liability. So it was super interesting to watch Iga's tactics in this match because she served the vast majority of her first and second serves to Coco's forehand, and Coco was giving her a lot of mistakes off the forehand return. There's no way for me to know this, but I'm guessing that Coco's strategy going into this match was to play more aggressive because it's going to be hard to beat Iga at her game. However, the shot selection from Coco was poor. It appeared that she was trying to flatten out the forehand and she was committing a lot of net errors and also spraying the ball at times. I analyzed Coco Gauff's forehand in depth last year and I didn't find any technical deficiencies. Now you have to understand that in Coco's case, the forehand is absolutely the weakest link. So how can something be weak if there are no technical deficiencies? Well, it has to do with the mental game. So Coco's forehand is absolutely a problem that's in her mind, because what happens when you lose trust or confidence in your forehand is that you then indeed end up with some technical deficiencies. Let me give you a concrete example. So have you ever had a match where you started to double fault and maybe there's nothing technically wrong with your second serve, but once you make 2 or 3 double faults, it kind of gets in your head, and then the next time you have a second serve in an important point, you lose confidence, you lose trust, and you start steering and pushing the ball. So this is exactly what happens to Coco when she starts missing a lot of forehands. She loses confidence in it, and she does get more cramped on that side, more tight on that side. She also changes her swing path, and often there's just not enough height on her forehand, and she dumps the ball into the net. Now the solution to this problem is quite complex, but one example in this match that proves to me that what I'm saying is correct is how Coco played her forehand being down match point. See, through the entirety of the match, with a small exception early in the second set where Coco went up 3-1, the forehand was a big problem. And when Coco was down 6-1, 5-3, 30-40 on her serve, she played a point where she hit 3 absolutely perfect forehands, ending with a forehand winner. She then was down another match point where she hit another very clean forehand. See, what happens a lot of times when there's a lot of pressure in a match, and when you combine that with not playing your best and losing confidence in a specific shot, once you are finally down match point, all that pressure dissipates and you start playing freely. This is a phenomenon that tennis players of all levels have experienced or will experience in the future. You're down match point, the match is lost in your mind, and all of a sudden that frees you up to start playing your normal game. So if you watch Coco saving the first match point, that is the potential that Coco has on her forehand, and that's how she was striking her forehand when she won the US Open and those warm-up tournaments in 2023. Now, a lot of people attribute Coco's problems to her grip, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with her grip. So on the forehand side, if you count the bevels from the top, we're going to count towards the right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Coco is on the 5th bevel with the base of her index knuckle. So this is what you call a Western grip. A semi-Western grip would be one over towards the left, and an Eastern grip would be one more over towards the left. So when someone holds a racket in an Eastern grip or a Western grip, those are grips that are more unorthodox. The most commonly used forehand grip worldwide is the semi-Western forehand grip, which places the base of the index knuckle on the 4th bevel. So there are some advantages and disadvantages to both the Eastern forehand grip and the Western forehand grip. And when it comes to the Western forehand grip, because the hand is so far underneath the racket, it's going to be more difficult to achieve a flat swing path. So in other words, if you want that racket tip to come through and flatten the ball out, the wrist is locked. It will not move. However, if you are in a semi-western grip and you want the tip of the racket to come through, the wrist is more fluid here. And of course, in an eastern forehand grip, it is more natural to let that tip of the racket come through. So it's just a biomechanic disadvantage that makes flattening out the forehand more difficult in a western grip because the hand is so far underneath the racket. So in essence, the western forehand grip makes a vertical swing path more intuitive, and that is what Coco needs to stick with. While the strategy of flattening out the forehand makes a lot of sense when we're talking about Iga, Coco needs to stick to her normal swing path and apply as much spin as possible. The problems that I see on her forehand are the following. She doesn't do well when she tries to flatten her forehand out, and because of a lack of trust and a lack of confidence, she gets tense on that side and gets a little bit cramped and doesn't finish the forehand properly. It doesn't look quite as clean as Iga's forehand. Now, if you think that somebody can change a forehand grip that has developed a lot of muscle memory, that is something that's easier said than done. You could make the case that if Coco Gauff was to change to a semi-western grip, this would be something that would be a very risky move because it could absolutely ruin her forehand. And it would take a tremendous amount of repetitions in the off season, and it would probably mean that she couldn't play tournaments for a while to make a change to a semi-western grip, which, by the way, is completely unnecessary. I'm going to tell you why. Iga has the best forehand on the WTA Tour. Do you know what grip Iga uses? The exact same grip as Coco. Iga and Coco have the same grip. Iga doesn't have any problems. She hits with a tremendous amount of topspin, but when I study Iga's forehand, the swing path is always consistent. So I don't see her flattening her forehand out too much. The forehand is always heavy. Now the trajectory of the ball might change, and of course, when we're dealing with striking the forehand at different heights, we're going to have different swing paths. This is the case for every player, and it is independent of the grip. So don't confuse the trajectory of the ball with the amount of spin that players are putting on the ball. For example, Roger Federer had a tremendous amount of RPMs, and he generally played the ball lower than someone like Nadal with also a tremendous amount of RPMs, who generally plays the ball a little bit higher over the net. Both of these players have a heavy topspin forehand, but the trajectory is different. So long story short, there's absolutely nothing wrong with Iga's grip, and there's also nothing wrong with Coco's grip. Anyone that picked Paolini making it to the final of Roland Garros deserves a lot of credit because it is a huge surprise that she made it all the way through. I'm a big fan of Mirra Andreeva. I think she has a lot of potential. She plays a very clean game, a very complete game. Of course, there are things that she can improve, but I'm looking forward to see how she's going to develop in the next few years. In my opinion, she could be at least in the top 10 or possibly even in the top 5. And I thought that she was going to do a lot better than she did in today's match. She didn't play well. I think the matchup was a nightmare for her, and I do think that Andreeva would have played better if she had played Rybakina instead of Paolini in the semis. And let me tell you why. Andreeva beat Paolini in Madrid. So she went into the semifinals with a winnable match, which means there was a lot of pressure on her, and she did not play as freely today as she did in yesterday's match against Sabalenka. And I'm sure Paolini felt a lot of pressure as well. This was the first time that both of these players were in a semifinal of a Grand Slam. In fact, this is the first time that Andreeva was in a semifinal of a professional tournament period. So the pressure must have been immense for both players. But to me, it seemed like Andreeva felt the pressure a tad more than Paolini. And on top of all that, I think Paolini is just a tough opponent to face in general because she is so feisty. She plays with so much enthusiasm. She puts a lot of energy into every point, every ball. This was a very difficult match for Mirra. Looking forward to the final. I don't think that Paolini is going to have much of a chance against Iga because she will basically have to play like Iga to beat Iga, and that's going to be very difficult. See, the players that do well against Iga are the big servers or the big hitters in general. These are the type of players that Iga sometimes struggles against. But in this case, Paolini being a player that plays somewhat similar to Iga, I don't foresee much of a chance. And if you look at the last 2 times Paolini played against Swiatek, Paolini got 3 games in each match, and I'm worried that the result in the final is going to be a similar one.